Well, hello, folks. This is Idiots versus Idiots. My name is Danny. I'm joined always by my cowboy-hatted associate, the Big Man.
I am the big man.
As if he is the only large man in Texas. As if there isn't the entire city of Beaumont, Texas, that makes him look
Tiny.
like Paris Hilton.
Well, I actually was on a call this week where, other people introduce me as the big man all the time. It's my brand,
Right.
yada, yada. Anyway, I was on this call, and this guy was trying to be, how people, when they're trying to sell you something, they're trying to get you to
Right.
sign up for something, they're very proper. And
Yeah.
he's like, Mr. the Big Man. He kept calling me Mr. the Big Man. And I'm like, that doesn't work. Just stop it. I appreciate it, but no.
I jokingly refer to your wife as Mrs. the Big Man.
Yes.
And that's only because I have transference fear, meaning you're afraid, so I'm afraid of you. I haven't even met the lady, and she's probably delightful.
Hey, there's only two things on this planet that I was ever afraid of, and one of them he died years ago, and my wife. Anyway, what are we talking about today, Danny?
Well, of course, we have to start off with, as many of you may or may not know, I'm a huge T-Mobile fan. It's a really weird thing to be a fan of a cellular service company.
It's an awful thing is what it is, but go ahead.
It's weird. I'm mostly a fan of their former CEO, John Ledger. He's a turnaround mastermind. And he's the one who executed the merger of T-Mobile and Sprint. And here's something interesting is I have this weird plan with T-Mobile. I can get a new phone whenever I want. Every month I can get a new phone. Just walk into a store, hand them my old one, get a new one, pay a monthly fee. This last few months, I've gone through a few phones, didn't like anything I purchased. They were pushing me really hard to get this service called T-Vision, which was their approach or their type of like Hulu Live, YouTube TV, Philo, whatever you want to call it.
Whatever.
All of these cable box replacement services.
And by the way, T-Vision is the worst name for a cut your cord, right? Cable
a cord
application.
cutting streaming.
T-Vision is absolute worst.
And this is a rare time where Mr. the Big Man and I agree on something. Because usually anything he believes regarding branding or marketing is always stupid. So
one of us is called the Big Man. The other one goes by Danny.
That's correct.
Go ahead. I digress. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, but here's what I find fascinating about it. They started the service last year. And
Which sounds like a very long time ago, but it's only been from conception to now 5 months. 5 months, and it's done.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting is T-Mobile is this huge company. They are in an antique or vintage. They're in an old industry. Telecom in this country is old now. It is not a forward-thinking, innovation-driven industry like tech might be. Sure, there's tech there, but it's not a tech business. It's, at the end of the day, one of the oldest service industries in the country.
Absolutely.
They did something that surprised me. After 5 months, just 5 months of the T-Vision service, they're canceling it. They're cratering the whole business.
It's not surprising to me. I have no doubt how this went down is somebody went to T-Mobile, which is, a big company, and they convinced them that this would be the step in the direction of getting into people's households from a data standpoint, right? Let's get them signed up for T-Vision, and then we'll offer them a product for, running all the data in their home and yada yada.
And that is what they were aiming at, I believe, is they wanted to set up 5G.
Absolutely. Replace cable entirely, right? With T-Mobile's 5G service, yada yada, and this is a step in. The problem is this whole app development of television is not a new thing. I guarantee you somebody convinced T-Mobile that this was new, it's going to be simple, everybody's going to get on it because it's the big thing. No, it was a big thing 3 years ago, right? And then they got into it and figured out these shows are expensive.
Yeah.
They're expensive. To the rights to these aren't cheap like it was when Netflix started. Aren't
Right.
cheap when a lot of these things started. And it's really not only expensive, but developing shows and stuff like that is difficult. And I don't think they understood
Well,
what they were getting into.
and so I also think that there's, when it comes to streaming, there's two, the two roads that diverge in this wood here. And there is the streaming platform, which is like your Netflix and so forth. And then there's your cord cutter replacement, which is, hey, all the same channels you get with cable, you're going to get
Exactly.
over here, but we're going to deliver over the internet versus a cable wire going through your house. And that's what, in T-Mobile's T-Vision was the latter. And what's interesting is I said, okay, do you guys have a Roku app? Because if I buy this service, I know my parents use this, whatever service I buy is what they end up using.
Right.
I share. So right now we have YouTube TV. I get an account. I think I get 6 accounts with it or something. And what's interesting is not only do they not have a Roku app, they said you have to buy our proprietary streaming dongle. Dongle
Again,
is my favorite word in all of tech.
It is. It really is. But who convinced them of that? Again, multi-billion-dollar company that gets sold, and we've talked about this by lots of companies here recently, get sold on this idea that's just wrong. Who in their right mind in today's world convinces a company that it's going to be successful to not only... Okay, I'm not going to put it on Roku. I'm not going to put it on Apple TV. I'm not going to put it on Amazon's Fire Stick.
Right.
I'm going to charge you for an individual dongle. And then on top of that, you're going to pay me $40 a month, right? To cut the cord, which is costing you probably not much more than $40 a month. You know what I mean?
Well, I think for a lot of people, it's probably more than 40. I know that. But here's why I thought the story was interesting to me, was that here's something that historically old, incumbent industry is not good at, which is
right.
cutting off dead weight. Google does a great
Absolutely.
job of like, hey, we have to rebrand from G Suite to Workspace, and we have to, like, they went from being Google Apps to Google whatever to G something to G Suite to becoming Workspace by Google, and they just chopped off those dead limbs of their tree. Just no problem, cut it, we're out. Right?
And you should. You should. Every business should be nimble, right? Like,
and that's the only way to survive in this, in not just these times, but the before times, right?
All times in business.
At all times, you have to be aggressive about innovating and then shaving off the innovation that does not work. And I just commend T-Mobile, because this is like for having, first of all, the Texas-sized cojones to enter into a space and realize we don't belong here. T-Mobile, by the way, is a company they have a banking app, right? They have a pseudo bank, like a prepaid debit card that you can get.
Right.
So they're not a stranger to, and this is something the big man hammers home on every episode. And when I just hear the beginning of the word, not only do I start to tune out, my heart stops beating just a little bit, saying maybe it's time to die.
All I'm saying
they
is
built
that
an audience, tell you what.
You know that it's true, which is your problem. Okay? That's all. You don't have anything better to say except for what my knowledge and experience brings. It's all right, Danny. Everybody already sees it. It's just time for you to buy in.
Okay.
I agree with you. Being nimble is the point. It's actually my biggest issue with especially the last couple of years of the hustle comments that have come out of entrepreneurship. Well, the hustle. Well, the problem is people apply that word hustle to beat my head against a wall for 18 hours a day over and over, doing the same thing, buying into somebody's hustle plan and bullshit that people peddle. And here's the reality is you need to be nimble. I get the hustle, you working is you should be. You can't do anything sitting on your couch, right? Unless it's a podcast, which is why we have this. But
Right.
the point is it still requires you to do something, but you've got to be nimble. Too much of the hustle mentality that's out there in 2021 and it was out there in 2020 was doing these same few steps over and over. And if they're not working for you, if they're not working for your business, change it up. Now, T-Mobile has done this, and here, let me tell you something where I'm not a big fan of T-Mobile. I think
Why?
they're not a great company. They don't provide a great service.
They provide fantastic service.
In comparison to anything else, no, they don't. They are third tier at best. Now, they've made some good decisions, and I agree with you that he turned around T-Mobile, right, by the acquisition of Sprint. As a company, it is still third tier in what it does best at.
Pardon. Let me correct you there. Before John Ledger acquired Sprint for T-Mobile, before that happened, they had in the country, they were number 2 for root metrics goes around, and they measure speed
what root metrics is. It's
the audience might not, right?
They are a third-tier company in customer service. They're a third-tier company.
I get the best customer service from them.
No, you do. It's the difference between talking about, I can find an individual that loves their Spectrum cable service or their Comcast service.
Well,
but the fact is, Comcast is awful.
There is no such human being. There is no such human being, I guarantee
you're using your personal experience versus business data. Here, again, look, ultimately, I'm going to agree with you here if you'll let me come around. The fact is by starting this, trying to do it, right, and then now partnering with YouTube TV, right, and Philo, however you pronounce it, they're going to make money where a year ago they weren't making money. Does that, you see what I'm saying?
Totally.
So I have no problem with that. That is a good decision. They cut off the limb that wasn't growing, but they're going to create some revenue from it anyway, right? They're splitting up what they have created between YouTube TV and Philo TV with partnerships, right? I'm sure everybody's giving them a cut for that. That's all good stuff.
And here's what I'm saying. I'm already a customer of YouTube TV. I'm already a loyal customer of T-Mobile. And I've had all the major carriers in the United States. I've had Verizon, I've had AT&T, and I've had Sprint. And I left Sprint to go to T-Mobile, and I've never been happier with my service anywhere. But
good for you,
right? And maybe
not
I'm
my experience, and a lot of people out there.
Yeah, okay, but you're old, so
and a hardcore fighter for what is good service and good things. Yes, that makes me old. Okay. And the fact that I'm willing to pay a premium to get those things, you are correct. If that makes me old, I am old. But look, for people like Danny,
listen, Richie Rich, all of us aren't going to go buy Verizon and pay $190 a month.
I pay for the service that I get, brother. That's all I'm saying. And I've been all over the country, and I get the same one. Here's the deal, though. If you are, like Danny, a loyal T-Mobile, and you did have T-Vision, and you enjoyed it, and you want to now switch over to YouTube, T-Mobile's got you covered because they are canceling this. They're giving you $10 off the monthly rate for YouTube TV. They've got a couple of different coupons and stuff like that you can get. So if you are a T-Vision Live or any of that stuff, like Danny was, or not was, you said it was offered to you. You didn't subscribe.
I never took it because I was just like, I'll wait till you have a Samsung TV app and a Roku app. Because I buy the service and my family uses it, and I'm like, if I have to explain to my old man, and my old man's not a complete Luddite, he gets tech.
Sure.
But, if I got to explain to him that now there's another dongle.
Oh, yeah. No, that all in itself.
Forget it. It's over.
If you suggested that to me when this was suggested in T-Mobile, that all by itself, I would have put money on the fact that it was going to die. Like it.
And the fact that they couldn't get on Roku, Apple TV, and Samsung, which are the biggest 3 smart TV app stores or whatever. If you're not in either, if you're in one of them, if you're just in Roku
or or Amazon's Fire Stick.
If they were in either one, it would have been done.
That's it.
But they had their own proprietary box. But this is a lesson now for if you like these services that are like Philo TV and some of these other ones, they simply do not have the app support. And if you are not on Roku, at least on Roku, you have to at least, this is my rule, Danny's rule. I'm a tech genius. I'm a business wizard. I'm a brilliant guy. Take my advice for free.
I'm
You
so
are
glad
not,
it's 2021 and you can identify as whatever you want. But go ahead. Nobody check Danny's credentials is all I'm saying. Go
it's
ahead.
2021, and if a brown guy wants to call himself a wizard, he can.
Go ahead and say what you were going to say.
I'm just saying that you have to at least be on Roku, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think Roku is by far, and I'm a big Roku fan.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I also have the Amazon product as well, but
Fire
I
Stick.
find the Roku devices, and all the way back to Roku's original devices actually don't even work because they don't have the processing power. They had to give up last year. I think last year before last. But so I've been a big fan of Roku since the beginning. And you're right. I think it actually is the most widely used worldwide is the Roku versus the Amazon product.
I have the Roku. I forget which one it is, but it was like $70. And I bought the fanciest one for my dad, and I said it was a Father's Day gift, but it was basically so I could watch TV at their house.
Well, and look, here's one thing I found as part of this article that when I read it, I was like, well, that makes a lot of sense, and that could kill your business when you're trying to start up. It said their TV software provider, so whoever they were using to create the programming of this, encountered financial challenges along the way. So if you're trying to create a new product and the company you've partnered with all of a sudden starts having financial problems and the product you paid them for starts falling off of a cliff because of lack of support or whatever it may be, that in itself could have been enough for a big company to go, yep, I'm out.
Right. And we might as well go to these established, I don't know about Philo TV or who backs it or what kind of their financial operations, but YouTube TV is obviously humongous. They're massive. And, I've been in between, like, switching from them to, like, Hulu Live. But now that I get a 10% or $10 a month discount, I'm happy to stick with them,
Well, and who wouldn't partner with Google? Like, I mean, seriously. I mean, if you
Exactly.
have an opportunity to part with Google and that's your, step in the door, and maybe this leads to a long-term, bigger deal between Google and T-Mobile, that could be a good thing for people. You know what I'm saying? So I don't blame them. I appreciate them for being nimble and that kind of stuff. And you're right, that's what we should take out of it. And creating a new revenue stream for themselves. Because like I said, they didn't give this up for free. Right? Partnering with YouTube TV and Philo is going to give them some slice of the pie.
They're going to get something. They're not doing it for nothing. And as just to sum up here, they were nimble, they were innovative. The first
Absolutely.
thing is they were innovative. They said, how do we go to our existing subscribers, our existing customer base, and how do we extract more of their money? Right?
I love that. Extract more of their money.
Listen, it sounds like this awful, pernicious behavior, but these subscribers are paying for their TV somewhere. Might as well be at T-Mobile.
That we are in a commercial-driven society, and that's the way it is. There are only a finite number of people that use a finite number of dollars in any given day. And every business, you're either growing or you're dying. There is no third direction. So you have to find a way, and I think that's the hardest part for places like Verizon, T-Mobile, and stuff like this. I don't know. I'm not a big promoter, and I know we talked a lot of stocks and investing and stuff like that. And again, I'm not here to give anybody advice, but I find it difficult to invest in those companies over the next decade because I don't know where they find their answer to this is 5G, right?
Right. And listen, I think that, so I was trying to, in summation, they were innovative. They were thinking about how to extract another dollar from their existing customer because they were where they innovated first, where John Ledger innovated first with T-Mobile was pricing transparency, right? Straightforward pricing. He eliminated a lot of plans. Basically got people onto there's just one plan.
Right.
T-Mobile, one plan. That's it. Right?
Unlimited data, unlimited. Yeah.
So they were innovative. They were nimble. And they canned it when it was a bad idea. When something wasn't working, they gave it, Noah Kagan he's an Austin guy. He's an innovator, entrepreneur rather. He has AppSumo. He's like, you got to give something 100 efforts, 100 tries. So, for instance, if we're going to start a podcast, we're going to give it 100 episodes before we decide, is this worth it? Is this a failure? Whatever. And I think that you should have those inflection points in your business journey, in your entrepreneurial journey. While you're building a business, you need to stop and go, somewhere throughout this process, are we going to stop and look at, is this working or not?
Absolutely.
We need to pivot. We need to quit. And if you don't have those, if you're not asking yourselves those questions, even as you're growing.
Is quitting this podcast an option? You just said, are we?
Yeah.
Ugh. You will get an email from Daniel. Danny likes to say my lawyers later today resigning from, you know what I mean? I'm sorry.
Nice to... Don't let the door hit your backside on the way out, brother. I don't care.
He says that now, folks, but he'll call me later and beg me to stay.
No, do you not... Someone clearly has not read their terms of service. The terms of this agreement say if you willfully part, I leave with all the assets. You have a 1-year carryover of alimony to the corporation. So bye-bye.
Danny's like a fungus. You ain't getting rid of him.
That's right.
That's all I'm saying.
I'm like foot fungus, baby. I just keep coming back. Woo. All right. We got to let you know about one thing here. Over at Idiots versus Idiots, I'm sure that you did not know this, but you should have by now. We are death peddlers. That is right. We peddle the death of plastic pollution. Not only does Liquid Death murder your thirst, 10% of every can sold goes to end plastic pollution. And frankly, my friends, I have to tell you, it is a superior water delivery system. I just realized at the start of today's show that I'm out.
Well, yeah, right? I was going to say, you usually have like 15 empty cans on your desk in front of you. Okay, right. I don't know how Liquid Death could sponsor us any more than it does on your desk.
That's
usually.
Right.
So, you know.
Unfortunately, I feel like I'm kind of a junkie because I realized I was out. I was like, oh, man, what am I going to do, man? Am I going to just drink regular water out of a bottle?
We can't have that. We can't have
right.
that.
If you use code idiots10 on liquiddeath.com, you will get 2 free koozies with your order. Are you ready for the next story, sir?
I am. Let's do it.
Okay, Mr. Big Man. An incumbent, established media conglomerate.
Yes.
I'll tell you, a half hour before we started recording the show, I was on the phone with someone else, and I get a call from Mr. the Big Man. Because I wrote a headline in our notes. So the way we do this is I find stories and I write a 2-sentence summary. So you can look at it. It's basically for me to jog my memory because sometimes I'll pull stories weeks in advance.
Sure.
So it just helps me jog my memory. Okay, I read the story. I know what this is about. So it's in there. I wrote the word heritage radio brand, meaning old company that does radio, right? Just like Heritage Automaker, meaning Ford makes electric car called Mustang Mach-E.
Does anybody under the age of 30 use the word heritage? No.
I'm not under the age of 30.
Go ahead. Anyway.
I'm like 30-something, so.
Okay.
There's a little confusion, but
all I'm saying is if I went to my 13-year-old and say, hey, what does heritage mean? They would not know, is all I'm saying. But go ahead.
Is our audience made up of 13-year-olds?
I'm just saying that you have a tendency to call me old for using old words and old whatever. You using the term heritage radio, first of all, does not ring the bell of. And then second of all, heritage radio is a company.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Anyway.
So let me rephrase.
So we had to clear things up because Danny,
dinosaur radio, and media conglomerate sees the asteroid in the sky. It says podcasting on it, so it's like that. It's like that character in one of the Transformers movies where he's like, listen, they were going to take over, so I just decided to get on the winning side of this.
There you go.
Entercom, anyway. which a new company, which is an old company that has rebranded itself as Audacy.
Audacy.
No, Audacy.
Audacy.
Like Odyssey, like Honda Odyssey, but it's spelled stupidly. Yeah. They have the dumbest. Let me just say something. As far as rebrands go, they rebranded with a cool name, but a logo from 1970.
Well, that seems to be this weird look. And again, I get why they're rebranding. This has another thing of kind of being nimble and kind of whatever.
Yeah.
They want to go from being known as a radio company, which they own radio stations all across the country. They want to go from being known as a radio station to this pivotal. We're embracing, still going to own our radio stations, but we're embracing podcasting. And they want to kind of get rid of, because it's hard sometimes when you've been around a long time and you're known for one thing, it's hard to get anybody to ever look at you for something else, right?
Yeah.
So I am all for, again, rebranding and embracing change. In this case, it's podcast. I agree that the CEO, David Fields, I'm going to read this quote. I agree with this 100%. Says, it was time for a new identity, a new brand that really reflects the depth and breadth of all the things that we do and the ambitions and vision that we have going forward. Podcasting is the number one creator of audio content in the United States. I agree with that moving forward, and I think that area of radio stations, traditional radio, being more and more about music and more, less about the morning drive shows and the afternoon drive shows and stuff like this, and it already has for the last 15 years, and podcasting picking up that torch of talk radio. Right. I think that there's no truer definition of that going in the next 10 years.
Absolutely. So, what's interesting is Entercom is this, like I said, a dinosaur. Legacy media is probably the word I should have used.
Yeah, legacy media makes way more sense.
So it's a legacy media conglomerate. I think Entercom also owns TV stations, if I'm correct. But
I think so.
Yeah. Cumulus, which owns Westwood One and Podcast One. Clear Channel used to be called iHeart, and they used to be called Clear Channel. They became iHeart Radio, then they became iHeart Media. Right. Now iHeart actually reports their podcasting revenue separate from their radio revenue. So they're actually already moving towards. So here's all that's going to happen for companies like now Audacy, formerly Entercom, Cumulus, and iHeart. Is it used to be radio, TV, traditional media, and they still own Clear Channel Outdoor. It's still called Clear Channel Outdoor, which is their billboards. Then it used to be podcasting down here, and all that's happening is an inversion, right?
Absolutely. Well, and companies like Spotify, whatever. Look, you've got a company like this. Again, we keep talking about you're growing or you're dying, right? There's no third direction. This company is doing everything it can to stay relevant to investors going forward when you have companies like Spotify or whatever. And guess what? They're doing the same thing. They introduced a partner. They announced a partnership with Demi Lovato, BetMGM to get on. We talked about several times the last couple of weeks about betting apps. And
yes.
Again, and I think that's huge going forward in the future.
The marriage of sports talk radio and betting apps.
Absolutely.
Right? That's huge. And the reason I pull up stories like this is because I learned something from them, and I want to bring that to our audience if that's valuable to people. And the reason I think this is interesting is I think there's a strong FOMO out there in the world of the great big wide world of podcasting. There's FOMO, like I should have started 10 years ago. Let me tell you something. If you had a sucky idea 10 years ago and you put out a podcast, no one would still be listening.
Right. Absolutely.
If you put out you could start from scratch today. If you have a good product, people will buy into it. The beauty is you don't have to be first man through the wall. There's that quote from the movie Moneyball, and it's who's ever the Red Sox manager's character is saying, first man through the wall gets bloody, second man through the wall gets rich. And, it's the pioneer versus buccaneer. The pioneer is the guy who's going to go innovate this thing. And, if you want to parallel, let's look at tech. Napster. Nothing. Right. You got nothing. The guy who started Napster today is not even worth $1 billion. He might be worth $10 million. $10 million is great. It's better than a kick in the shorts, but you know who made $1 billion? You know who's worth damn near $1 trillion?
Who's that?
Apple. iTunes looked at freaking Napster completely disrupted the market. And iTunes came in and said, here's how we make all this legal and accessible to people.
Absolutely.
They sold people the tracks. They sold them the devices. So there is still, we have not reached peak podcast. We're not going to get there for a long time.
I think it'll take decades just because of the amount of people there are. Because if you know a person right now, and usually we've gotten to the point where everybody knows at least that one guy friend that's really into podcast, you know that podcast friend of yours is constantly complaining that they've listened to everything. That they've run out of things to listen to. And they go to Twitter and they say, hey, who's got more podcasts? Because the fact is there's not enough content for that podcast. Even the current small percentage that it is, there's not enough content, good content, that that's driven by what people want. That true crime is a big thing in podcasting, right?
That's for chicks, though. That's for chicks.
I'm just saying it's a genre of podcasting that is in high demand. Right?
It's for chicks that when they're driving to Target to spend all their husband's money.
Right. Trying to figure out how to knock them off for life insurance, right? Is that where you're going with it? Anyway,
precisely.
The point is there's so many people that room to grow for podcast listeners is so big that once we get into cars where people are listening to it in their cars, like they did radio, like they are currently doing satellite radio, right? I think satellite radio would be a great future for podcasting. Satellite radio picking up more podcast type channels, like they have sports radio talk channels, and this kind of stuff. If we ever got a podcasting radio station on satellite radio, I think it would grow and grow and grow. Right. And I think there's an opportunity for Entercom here. I don't understand
Audacy.
Why they wouldn't.
They're called Audacy.
I'm sorry, Audacy now. Entercom became Audacy. I don't know exactly when that went into effect, but the point is I think there's still a marriage. People still get in their cars and turn on the radio. Right?
Sure.
There are technology type people out there, like my buddy that doesn't listen to the radio. He plugs in his phone to his radio, every time he gets in. There's satellite radio, there's alternatives. But the fact is, most of America still gets in their car and turns on the radio station. Why has traditional radio, not taken some dumb, 97.3 whatever that nobody listens to anymore, and transitioned it to a podcast only talk radio station where they just feed in these, you know what I mean? Why hasn't that happened? Why isn't that?
Why would you give away our entire business plan, you ding dong?
I'm just saying, I don't understand. You have all these people out there. You have this legacy, as we should say,
legacy
media.
Listen,
that has not caught on to this way yet, and I don't get it.
Because if you go to a hardcore history with Dan Carney, I think that's the guy who hosts that, and you say, hey, we want to license your back catalog, right? And we're just going to play it on some AM station, and we're going to license it for X number of dollars. There are so many people that will just tune in because they're driving somewhere. Because I don't want to pull up the app and then I have caps on my data because of the deal I signed with T-Mobile. I could have gone unlimited, but I have an app. So I have to download. So I sincerely, I have decent Wi-Fi. I will be in the garage of my house. So I'm trying to make a 10-minute drive to HEB.
Exactly.
I'm waiting 8 minutes to download a podcast so I can make a 10-minute drive to HEB. So, I think that is, you're entirely correct. And I think there is someone out there right now at a company going, nobody cares about a top 40 anymore, right?
Right. Why not switch it?
Let's flip our sports talk radio to our top 40 channel.
Yep.
And flip that talk station, the sports talk, because sports talk is still a legacy media avenue that is going to be profitable for the foreseeable future. People still care about that.
You tie that into betting. Like, you just tie that into betting.
Yeah.
One of my favorite sports talk radio shows, the Pat McAfee Show, right? They do it live Monday through Friday. They are not on traditional radio. They started out on traditional radio and figured out very quickly that they wanted to curse and talk about things that they couldn't on regular radio. And I think that may be the issue with a lot of podcasters going on radio, is it's got a lot of legacy rules around it, right? The FCC and stuff like that.
But I think the person who goes to license that media says, hey, we can cut out those parts.
Absolutely,
right?
Or bleep over them like they do radio songs and hip hop back in the day and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think but Pat McAfee Show or whatever, they have now spawned out of that what was originally a just a sports talk podcast, right? They did on YouTube Live and now other things. That's spawned 2 other shows. You have an actual podcast that came out of the show that's not during the show, and you now have actually started this week called the Hammer Down. DAHN for some reason, Hammer Down, but it's a sports betting podcast that used to be part of the show, part of the 3 hours a day show that became so popular that it's now become its own show and already has 1 million subscribers inside a week.
Wow.
And it's a couple of guys from that live show doing just sports book betting where they deep dive into it. Now that's just for people that want to do that, but it's going to grow and it's going to continue to grow. And I think legacy radio needs to get in on that sooner.
And here's my favorite thing out of this, not my favorite thing, something that I find enjoyable or humorous. There are so many podcast networks, and I'm in the industry. We're in the industry. Okay.
Right.
I'm at the cross section of I do a podcast, but it's a podcast about business. So I'm doubly interested in the subject. There's 2 reasons I'm interested. But Audacy, or Audacy,
yeah.
Or Entercom already owned 2 podcasting networks. So they owned Candace 13, never heard of them. Pineapple Street Studios, also never heard of them. Who are these people?
And that, look, you're right in podcasting. That if I had a frustration with podcasting, and this is any company in the beginning, right? Any big change in the beginning, is there are too many podcasting networks, so you can have great shows. Our show should be bigger than it is right now. Now that's my opinion, being part of the show. I am the big man. We should have a bigger, audience, Danny doesn't like to say. But I
want us to have a bigger audience so we can get paid more, dude.
How do you find podcasts in today's world? It's hard. You type podcast into YouTube, you only get the top 4 or 5 podcasts on YouTube. You don't find all these podcasts. Same thing on Apple Podcasting, same thing on Anchor or any of these.
Right.
The fact is there's too many places. Not everybody is everywhere because a lot of these places try to get you to buy into their product their way. You and I have looked at several podcasting places out there that they want you on their podcasting platform. And guess what? This is even the bigger ones like Spotify. A lot of them, right, they're buying unique rights to the Joe Rogan show, right, or whatever. Right. So you have to go to their product. The problem is if you're not one of those big names, how does everyone out there looking for you find it? And the fact is eventually, like you were just talking about Entercom buys 5, 6, 7 different companies. The reason they own hundreds of radio stations is because back in the day, radio stations were owned by individual companies. And then throughout the 70s and 80s, these bigger companies came in and go, no, we need to start buying up these so we can create some consistency, which led to a better product, which led to your Howard Sterns and you know what I mean? These bigger names by combining companies. Podcasting needs to do the same thing.
Right. And I do think, though, it's good that there's some competition. And I think there is platform ubiquity, meaning if we distribute our podcast on
Anchor.fm.
Yeah, on Anchor. I blanked out for a second there. We deliver our podcast, and that spits it out everywhere, right?
Right.
So there is no longer going to be, we're only available like there is in the case of Joe Rogan and that type of thing. But for the average podcaster out there, the guy starting out, he can be on your phone the same way Joe Rogan's on your phone. You can get Idiots vs. Idiots on Spotify. We're right next to freaking Joe Rogan, right?
Well, I'm just saying that if Spotify or Audacity wants to come in and buy our, in exclusivity, they should. Just reach out. You should do it now before we're too big.
Yeah, because right now, Barstool's offer was not big enough, right? And Portnoy wouldn't even get on the phone with me. He had some intermediary talk to me. I was like, I want to talk to Portnoy. Like, nah.
That's right.
I was like, if we're not a big enough deal for the CEO and founder of the company to talk to us, I don't want to do a deal with you.
Just get out of here.
Like, what is this piddly 6-figure offer? Like, come on.
Get out of here. All right, what do we got?
You ready for the next story already? You're over this?
Oh well, we got some bills to pay before then, right? What else we got?
Yeah, right. Well, that's apropos. I am so touched to tell all of you about the newest and most exclusive club in the United States of America, which anyone can join. It is the Up Yours Club. Up Yours Club is powered by Buy Me a Coffee. And our Up Yours Club, or our Buy Me a Coffee account, is now open. It's free to join. All you got to do is give us your email address, and you can send us an ongoing or one-time non-tax deductible donation. Now, you have to discuss with your tax professional whether or not this is deductible or not deductible. I don't actually know.
Giving money to Danny is definitely a charity that I write off. That's all I'm saying. So upyoursclub.com is the domain. Right? Upyoursclub.com domain. It was duly named Up Yours Club domain because several of our very first podcast episodes, Danny just couldn't stop telling me, and everyone else for that matter that was listening, Up Yours. You know what I mean? Upyours.com.
And I want you to know something. I carry that spirit with me to this day. Right? Up yours all the way, baby. All the way.
If you don't like my opinions, up yours, right?
And listen, I don't like any of your opinions. And somehow, I feel like this is one of those really bad marriages, but no one's abusing anyone. We just hate each other. And at this point, we're playing chicken to see who's going to quit first. We don't want to be the first one.
The tagline forever. We're going to be 20 years into this and millions of listeners, and the tagline's still going to be the same. One of us is a successful businessman, and the other one's jealous. Which one is which? Everyone out there can decide. That's all I'm saying.
I am not jealous of you whatsoever. So that must make me the successful one.
I will put it out there on Twitter every day. I don't care.
You must be jealous of my perennial tan. I
am. You have very
You
good
left
skin.
that wheat toast in the toaster a bit too long tan. Now, this is a subject that is personally interesting to both of us because we are lovers of the real estate industry. And I am someone who likes to ask himself big, audacious questions. And one of those questions is, retail is so dead. We can't kill retail anymore. We have now taken the ashes of retail and we are attempting to burn them. It's so dead. Okay? Now, what happens to these huge malls that are sitting all over this country? And by the way, indoor malls started in near my hometown in Minnesota. The Southdale Mall was the first one. I still remember going there when I was younger. It was the Richie Rich Mall.
Right.
We would go there, and my old man used to say, it's like a museum. You go there, you look, don't touch anything. So, that's...
I can't pull off that accent.
You're not allowed by law.
I'm not allowed to pull off that.
Yeah, no, I'm allowed
my skin
to.
Again, right?
That's a problem.
Look,
that's gonna be a racism. But
that's an ism. I don't know what kind of ism.
The largest mall in the country was built. I lived down the street from the Mall of America, and it's the last time I was over there, it was wild to see because it's empty right now,
Right.
But the last time I was able to walk in, and if you're from there, you really don't walk into that place unless you work there, right?
Okay.
And so the last time I walked in there was probably 2018. And this is 15 miles from my parents' house, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they've turned it into this destination for activities and all this other stuff. They have there's good restaurants in there now. Like when I was a kid, it was like the knockoff. Like it wasn't Panda Express. There was some knockoff of Panda Express that's only in the mall's food court.
Right.
Yeah, and so but it's turned into this beautiful thing. But at the same time, retail is so dead. The primary revenue generator for the mall business is retail.
Mall retail is definitely dead. Now, you're
So
outside, what they call outside retailers, right? Like Target and Walmart. All these places that came along after malls became these meccas of...
Yeah, so big box.
Right, big box retailers and whatever. Every mall had your Sears and your JCPenney and your Levine's. And,
both companies dead. Never heard of Levine's.
Right, and because those companies were so big and drew in people, you were able to have these smaller shops that were in malls that, because the foot traffic was so good to these big companies, that they made money as auxiliary companies, right?
Yes.
And because that was my time, right? I grew up in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
And that was mall time. I mean, people went to
Yep.
the mall to do nothing. You
Right.
went to the mall to hang out, right? Like all
Yeah.
those 80s movies, you went to the mall to hang out because there was stores. You could spend hours and go into different stores and see things that you could never afford. You could eat and you could,
Yeah,
you could
and
see
like,
electronics at different places,
My favorite, I should say my favorite, one of my favorite comedians is a guy named Dane Cook. He had that whole line about, like, white kids who try to pretend they were hoodlums. And they were like, no, man. You can't be on this side of the mall, man. This is our side. We cover the Gap.
That's right. We covered the Gap all the way down to Spencer's.
That's right.
So like that was my time. Now I 100% understand that you fast forward 30 years from then and you go, hey, that is dead. That has been dead for a while. All Dos Equis did is drive that knife through the heart, right?
Listen, that knife there was 3 knives in the heart, and Dos Equis just came in and said, "Katana sword."
Yeah.
Like,
here's the thing. There was a lot of cities, a lot of companies that have been fearful for the last decade about what are they going to do, right? You've got these huge buildings and in some cases really good parts of town, right? There are some cases that are the opposite. Most big cities have at least 2 malls, and one of them was in the not so great part of town that was the older mall, and the newer mall that was in a much nicer part of town, right? That everybody went to. The problem, though, is what were they going to do with these massive, in some cases, 100-acre type sizes of places that people weren't going to go? And what I'm thankful about and what I love about entrepreneurship in general is everything always finds a way, right?
That's
Every
true,
field finds something to grow,
and,
right? In an old Ranger term.
I think that's, Jurassic Park. I've never seen the films. I don't care. He goes, life finds a way.
Life does find a way.
The market always finds a way. And if you are interested in the subject at all of these abandoned malls and abandoned big box stores, there's a YouTube channel I'm going to recommend. It's called Bright Sun Films. They have a series called Abandoned and Bankrupt, and they just talk about some of the most interesting. And I find all this stuff fascinating. And the reason we do a podcast about business and marketplace news is because I was already talking about this stuff to people and boring them at parties and talking about, can you believe this mall went out of business? And the reason we bring this up today is there's 2 reasons. Mm-hmm. The first reason is Amazon is buying up some of these old malls.
Absolutely.
Because Amazon, this is full circle. It's like Amazon saying, we're buying up Barnes & Noble.
Amazon going, I killed you. Yeah. Now I'm going to use you. Right?
That's right. It's like if your parent or somebody got they got in an unfortunate car accident, and then the guy who crashed into them was like, so I'm going to buy up your house now because they don't need it anymore.
Yeah. I need you to. I'm the doctor that fixes your leg after I ran into you. And
That's right.
And look, what I find great about this story is it's not just Amazon. Amazon, over the last couple of years, I think 2016 to 2019, they've converted 25 malls, which is, I think that's just going to accelerate, right? As far as number of malls. But the cool thing to me is it's not just Amazon turning into warehouses. There's been some of these malls they've turned into schools. There's been some of these malls they turned around and turned them into condos, right? They've turned them into, I've seen them, cities are proposing to take some of these malls and turn them into community colleges, because that's one of the growing things going forward is they want less universities and more community colleges and that kind of stuff. They've looked at turning these into community colleges. I thought, why wouldn't a smaller mall, right, like on the northeast side of Austin,
Yeah,
There
the
used to be a
Homestead.
mall, and now it's a company, and part of it is also a community college here, right?
Are you talking about the Homestead Mall?
No. I forget the one. It was on
Okay.
183 and Mopac, or 183 and 35, which nobody of y'all know or care. The
Yeah, I
point
know.
it's a dead mall and has been dead because it was in the older part of town. The
Yeah.
point though is, and it was bought up by Rackspace and by
Yeah. I know which one you're talking
Austin's
about
community college. The point is why wouldn't you take a smaller mall like it was? It wasn't one of those massive malls. A smaller mall like that. Why wouldn't that? We've talked about going forward commercial space on this podcast before, co-working space. Why couldn't you take a smaller mall and make it a massive co-working space, add contracts with big companies in the area
Of course,
that don't want these big, huge leases anymore, and you could even give them their own side space that used to be, right, Spencer's or whatever, and that's now whatever, and you walk into a mall that still has a food court for all the people that work there every day.
There, plenty of bathrooms. They put in a gym or something.
And it becomes a large co-working space where you still have your coffee shop, and you still have your, you know what I mean, your lunch space or whatever. So it can be ran very similarly.
Listen, I think that like you're right, and I'm someone who's very interested in commercial real estate. I'm going to be in that industry later this year. And the reason I picked the story, actually, the big man sent it to me. It's one of those rare occasions where he's allowed to send me a story. He actually sent me two stories, and this other one is that a mall out in Phoenix, Arizona, it's getting repurposed. They are going to turn it into it's called the Paradise Valley Mall. It's going to get rezoned. It's going to have high-end grocery shopping, all this other stuff. I see car dealerships buying up part of this or the entirety of it, and like there's 1,000 different uses for these huge old things. And if you're an innovative person who can think of how to use one of these old malls, there is absolutely an opportunity for you to, and you don't have to have a penny. That's the thing. You just have to have the right idea.
Need it done, because for a decade, some of these older malls have been sitting empty forever.
Yeah, and
forever.
So the one of the older malls that was going that I used to, me and my crew, we used to hold it down, as we would say. Their parking lot is now just used for car storage. Like they just store cars there for a car dealership. Here's the fun story. So, I was back visiting my folks and up north, and I had heard that they had built this new Lifetime Fitness. Lifetime Fitness is this national chain of luxury gyms. And this gym is twice the regular price of what I pay to go to the gym. You pay more, you get better exercise. That's what they always say.
Sure.
So, I had heard it was built in a certain part of town near a mall, near the Southdale Mall, the first ever indoor mall in the country, in the world, I believe. And I walk into this, what I believed to be the place, because this is a new building. So I was like, oh, this is it. I kept thinking, this has got to be 30,000 square foot. And I heard this new place is 150,000 square feet. And Lifetime Fitness, the one up in North Austin, something like that huge. It's huge.
Right.
Like, that's really weird. It doesn't have like the normal stuff, the tennis or whatever. And I walk in and I'm looking around and I go, that's weird. All they have in here is a bunch of furniture. Like, there's just couches, tables. I'd walked into a Restoration Hardware. The high-end the high-end furniture store. They had built a new one in the same vicinity, and I was not paying attention. So I walk in wearing like gym clothes with a gym bag. The gal, there's no check-in desk, there's no towel desk. I'm like, what's going on?
You don't look up when you're walking from the car to the building? Like, come on, man.
I got good parking, so I was excited about, like, man,
right?
I hate having to walk too far, especially when I'm going to the gym.
Yeah,
kind of exercise, not walk. So I walk in, and I was like, why do these couches all have price tags? What's going on?
That's awesome. Now,
but,
look, again,
as it turns out, and I want to relate it back to what I was trying to say, though, is like, what had happened is the gym bought up 2 anchor stores and everything in between them and put a gym in. And that is brilliant. right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I think you're going to see more and more of that. I think cities where these malls were, which had a tendency to be these smaller cities right outside of bigger cities,
That's
right?
right.
Up in Dallas, it was in, the biggest one was in Mesquite, right? Right
Yeah.
outside of Dallas, called Town
Yeah.
East Mall, right? Or whatever. And so I think these small cities, some of them have been sitting on these spaces for so
Oh,
long,
yeah.
and that loss of tax revenue, that loss of everything, they are willing to help out and do just about anything to get an Amazon warehouse to increase those taxes,
right.
to get
Yeah.
a co-working space, to get a high school to move in there, anything that would save / make them money. They are down for, and you know what? I like to see it. I'm glad to see it. I hate the fact that I see something, especially that big, go to waste, not being used when there's so much potential.
I love to see it. Let me tell you why I love to see it. Because when I see it, all I see, I'm like whatever that one of those cartoons where the dollar signs are rolling in my eyes, because I see it and I go dollar
Right.
signs. It's just
Ding, 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 ding,
opportunity.
ding,
I
ding,
see
ding, ding, ding,
opportunity.
ding, ding.
And so I just want to close out the story by saying this much: like, hey, if you're out there and you have the exact, this company should do this, or this whatever should move in here, or we should split it up this way. Start approaching those companies. Like, find a real estate agent, become a project manager, whatever. There is a way for you to profit off of having a good idea on how to reuse an old, soon to be empty mall. And what's interesting is I've walked into one of these malls recently as a goof. And I walked into the mall, by the way, during the holiday season, where normally you'd park a million miles away, shoulder to shoulder with people. I walked in there and I walked around without a mask because I was within not 6 feet of people. I was within 100 feet of another person
Yeah.
at all times.
Yeah,
Right?
the last time I went, my wife and I went to Town East Mall when we were up in Dallas, which again is where I grew up, and it
Yeah.
was that kind of mall because it was the nice mall. All 3 levels were circular, so it wasn't one of those malls where you got out of whack and you ended up on the other side of
Yeah.
God's green earth, right, or whatever. They were all 3 circulars. It was great. It was built perfectly, and whether you went there in the middle on a Wednesday at noon, you had to park in the second parking lots. It was that kind of crazy. And the last time we went a couple of years ago when we were up in Dallas, every third store was closed. You could park wherever you wanted. And this is one of those places that it was so popular. The mall was so popular at the time, of course being outside of Dallas, that everything built around it was commercial. Because you couldn't fit enough people in the mall. So everything around it was commercial development and more stores. They had a restaurant row there where everybody, you know what I mean? It developed even the area around it. Yeah. And of course, when Town East Mall has died, what do you think has happened to all of those commercial developments beside it? The same thing, right? So yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a great story. It's going to be a lot of fun to see the innovation and what people come up with to use these places.
And, you're right. It's going to be innovation. And here's the thing that they're already built, right?
Yep. They're done.
So they're already built. And they're built the way they are built. Like, condos are going to be rough, I think, because you're going to have to cut in windows and water and all this other stuff to make it livable space. That's going to be hard.
Every company had water. You know what I mean?
But
every
the windows
business,
are going to be rough.
No, absolutely. I think that's a much more developer heavy, but it's still possible is the point.
Totally.
These are every place has electricity, every place has water, every
place
has a lot of the things that are expensive.
Absolutely, you're totally right. And that is, for me, an exercise I get into every month. I take 10 minutes or 20 minutes to sit down and go, I'm getting my real estate license. I want to be the commercial real estate business. How do I solve, and I'm not a developer, but how do I solve this issue of we have these dead spaces? And I spend that time thinking about it because at some point in time, I will fall ass backwards into the right idea, right?
Right. And a lot of these malls were aesthetically pleasing. Fountains and, you know what I mean, these big things that made it nice for people that are very expensive to create, by the way.
That's right. And at this point, most of these malls, it's a burden to everybody involved. So if you solve a problem, where everyone who's involved, the city, the state, the whatever municipality, the investors, the developers, the management company, this is a burden.
Absolutely.
If you solve something that is so burdensome to so many people, you're going to solve it at a discount for anyone else who's going to get involved, and then you're going to make a ton of money.
Absolutely.
So that's why I spent so much time thinking about it. That's why the big man sent me these stories and then sent me a text message and said, man, I'll tell you what, man, you only have 3 stories, not 4, tell you what. Cotton pick and tell you what.
I do not say, I pick cotton, but I don't say cotton picking. All right?
I know, that's true. I didn't mean to say that, and that might sound like I was disparaging him. I was not. I'm just trying to say something that sounds southern and folksy, that something like he would say. So, of course, we're, rounding home plate, as they might say in baseball. I've never watched a baseball game in my entire life, a match. But I do want to tell you about a company that I own called Rise Lentless. That's RISELENTLESS. RiseLentless.com. Rise Lentless sells fun coffee mugs for entrepreneurs, the side hustlers, and anyone that dares to dream big. The big man, of course, is modeling his one of one, too big to fail. Rise Lentless X, Idiots versus Idiots mugs. Our mugs are on the mugs. There you go.
Hey, for the right price, I'll make it 1 of 2. I don't care.
Absolutely. This last story is a little inside baseball. As you guys know, Idiots versus Idiots is based out of the lovely city of Austin, Texas.
Yes,
we're completely full. Don't move here. There's so many people here. We're completely full. Oklahoma, Tulsa, on the other hand, plenty of space. All sorts of vacancy.
Plenty of space.
Yep. And they got gambling up there. So, just so you know.
Only on reservations, though, but you can't move there.
Well, you can't live on a reservation, but you can at least get to the gambling.
You can get to the gambling.
Right now, I got to commute 6 hours up to WinStar if I'm trying to gamble.
Right. So, absolutely. So the story is?
The story is Joe Rogan to buy West Austin Theater for new comedy club. Wants to make Austin new hub for big laughs.
Look, if you, I know you and I are both a fan of Joe Rogan. We've talked about that on this podcast before, right? And if you even remotely follow the Joe Rogan podcast or the Joe Rogan experiment, right, as it's called, you know that...
or the Joe Rogan experience, as it's actually called. Okay.
The point is even before he moved to Austin... If you followed his podcast, he talked to comedian after comedian after comedian about what he wanted to do when he moved to Austin, right? He wanted to move to Austin. He wanted to create a comedy club out here. He wanted to continue to do his podcast, but create a comedy because him and the, what's the one out there?
The store, comedy store.
The comedy store had a big falling out, right? And then he, and he didn't find... His biggest issue with the Comedy Store was the fact that he felt like big names, if you weren't in at the Comedy Store, then you were out in comedy, right? And he wanted to create something that created more inclusivity with everybody, give everybody the power, the comedians the power, not the Hollywood elites, not the people trying to run things.
His falling out with the Comedy Store is well documented, and he had a comeback. Like the Comedy Store effectively... And what happened, though, is what's interesting is the Comedy Store effectively died. And when they let Joe Rogan come back, they had a complete renaissance there. And if you had, I had a buddy fly out. He's a big fan of comedy. He went to L.A. just to go to the Comedy Store. Right? He got a hotel near the Comedy Store just to go there. And he's like, you go there on a Tuesday night, and it's just heavy hitter after heavy hitter after heavy hitter. And what's interesting is Joe Rogan's been a guy who is very much as people might see him as a Hollywood guy, I see him as an outside Hollywood guy. Right?
He's not a fan of the traditional Hollywood, and that's part of what he says bringing this to Austin. He wants it out of L.A. He wants it out of the Hollywood machine. He wants it out of California. He wants something built by comedians for comedians. To kind of build a phrase there. He's bought the One World Theater, which,
has this actually closed? Do we know if this is actually closed?
It has not actually closed, but this is the deal, right? Like this particular theater, like a lot of venues in places, if they're not ran right, they fail. This has failed a couple of times, been in bankruptcy twice, right, or foreclosure twice. So he's found a space that somebody like him, and guess what? Not only has he found a space 10 minutes from his house. Right? He found a space right down the street from where he's going to be recording the podcast, where he can pop
Well, no,
back
I
and
don't
forth.
think the podcast is he records that in an office in South Austin.
Oh, is he doing it? I thought he was building a space
No.
in his, because he bought this mansion of a
Palace.
place.
Yeah,
Okay,
but I
in
don't
Westlake.
think I don't
right?
think a guy like Joe Rogan is, and we're not talking out of turn here. This is all information that's already on the internet.
Absolutely.
I'm not interested in doxing or anything remotely close to the neighborhood of saying. But here's the thing:
No,
a lot
but
of
this
these
is all public knowledge. Him buying a
Yeah,
mansion in Westlake is public knowledge. You can.
There's several
it's all
articles
over
about it.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Him buying this theater.
One World Theater.
It was actually, there was some misinformation about, because Cap City Comedy Club, which has been here in Austin forever, which is why
Yep.
Cap City, Capital City, right?
Yeah.
Comedy Club, actually bought a new building. They're moving off of the place that they've been forever. So there was some
Yeah.
misinformation about, is he buying this place? And no, Cap City bought that place and
Right.
was moving
And
over.
my question then is, man, is Cap City done for? Right?
Well,
Because
I
So
don't
here's the
know
thing.
that.
Joe Rogan is often never takes the credit, but is often credited with, and by the way, this is why I coined the phrase business and marketplace, because it's a marketplace thing. It's not a business thing. But what is interesting here for me is, Joe Rogan was effectively the reason that the store, the comedy store in Los Angeles, had such a thriving ecosystem of comedy. And although he is not the first comedian to start a podcast, he made it what it is. He made
Absolutely.
podcasting what it is, right? And he is such a, I would use the phrase, I think, like anti-Hollywood guy, in the sense that he looks at Hollywood as this thing, this succubus that's consuming money. And I was listening to, in preparation for this story, wink, wink, I was listening to an episode of his podcast where he had Bill Burr on. This was still when he was in Los Angeles, and he was like, there is no reason for anybody to give up a piece of their podcast to some radio company. There's no reason for
Absolutely.
any of these comedians. He's like, if you just stick, he's like, the first 2 years are going to suck, but if you stick to the first 2 years and you're funny, you'll build the audience, you'll start making money. And listen, he convinced Tim Dillon, who was a favorite of ours, who is now, Matthew Cox was kind of our big target to get as a guest. We landed that on the first one, thanks to
Right?
my genius and poorly worded email.
Uh-huh.
It was a pity get, but it's
Hey,
kind of like I
even
said,
a blind nut finds a squirrel every day.
all the way
Never know.
around. Listen, this is like in high school. Like, I got pity dates. I got a date though.
Hey, it doesn't matter. That's the
I
end
got
result.
the date. That's all that I listen. I don't care if it's a pity date or not. I got the date. That's all that matters.
Yeah. No, but look, all of these guys, Joe Rogan definitely, I think, because if you've seen enough of Joe Rogan, that you know he is a unique person, right? And
Yeah.
he's embraced who he is as an individual, and that has led to his success. That's what led him out of being on Out of the Comedy Store. He wasn't willing to bend to the rules, right? And it's well documented, and whatever. And that's Joe Rogan. You either take it.
Yeah, he went after
Mitzi,
Carlos.
right.
Yeah, Carlos Mencia.
Oh, okay.
That was what happened. Like, he got dropped by his management and everything because Carlos Mencia was stealing jokes, and then he went after Carlos Mencia, and that was
Right.
If that video is still out there, hilarious, by the way.
When they all got on stage and called him out for it. But again, the point though is, without all the drama, is he wants to build something. And look, he's made enough money. He's made it perfectly clear. He said on his podcast several times, I don't want to start this to make a ton of money. He's like,
Yeah.
I want to make it a low-cost place for people to be able to come and give the revenue that's created by this place to the comedians that perform here, because they get paid crap. The average everyday trying to up-and-come comedian gets paid garbage to go to these clubs and do these shows and stuff like that. He wants to pay them and give them the money. He's not in it. He wants to make it a place where people can learn and that kind of stuff.
And somebody who's, I'm not native to Austin. I moved here or whatever. And the headline for this story was Joe Rogan, that I wrote a headline, which is the summary, which I wrote is Joe Rogan will create a comedy hub in Austin, doing more to keep it weird than the tech will. So a lot of companies
really like that headline.
Listen,
it's hard for me to admit, but I really like it.
Okay. But listen, a lot of these tech companies are coming in, and I think it was Tim Dillon was like, I was having a dinner with someone. He was like, I was having dinner with a venture capitalist, and in Austin. And he's like, so he asked me, he's like, so where do you see yourself in 5 years? He's like, these guys are not going to keep Austin weird. Right?
No.
Yeah. And like,
No.
the city has a certain charm. And listen, by the time I got here in 2014, it was not exactly the same charm as it was before. And mostly I found that charm to be gross and I disliked it, which is why I'll never buy a house in Austin. But the thing that I find great about this is that it's going to bring these artistic type entrepreneurs. I look at comedians, the modern comedian has to be an entrepreneur. In order to succeed in the industry today, you have to be an entrepreneur. And here's all I see from that. As a guy who loves the industry, but has no interest in participating or capacity to participate, I'm funny, but I'm not funny like they're funny. There's going to be so much ancillary industry supporting the comedy business in Austin that there's going to be ways to profit. And guess what? We're going to walk around town now and see cool people. I still remember I saw Dave Chappelle sitting outside of a Whole Foods, the downtown, the main Whole Foods.
Yep.
I was like, holy crap, it's Dave Chappelle. And he just kind of looked at me like, come on, man.
Joe Rogan is definitely like, it's one of the things I like about him is he'll buy into this idea and he tries to get other people on board, right? How many people, there's been 2 or 3 comedians that have moved to Austin since he's moved to Austin that have been on his show and he's like, look, you're coming. I'm telling you right now, you're coming. A couple of weeks after he moved to Austin and started doing his podcast down here, Ron White was on his podcast. Ron White has lived in Austin, outside of Austin for a while. But he effectively retired from comedy. He said, look, I got tired of writing jokes. He's like, it's hard to write jokes. I got tired of writing new material, right? And he's like, and he retired effectively from comedy, and he told Joe Rogan on the podcast because Joe Rogan brought up, hey, I want to build a comedy club here, and here's why I want to do it, and how I want to do it. And Ron White told him during the podcast, he's like, I'll come out of retirement to do your comedy club. So you're going to get, with his kind of name and his kind of relationship with other comedians, you are not only going to get talent to come here, you're going to get retroactive talent from back ago that will come back because it's something different and new, right?
Yes.
To like a Ron White that maybe hasn't done comedy.
I think who's going to make a comeback off of this that I don't think anybody's expecting. Doug Stanhope. That's my guess.
Really?
My guess, yes, because I do think that they can drag Doug Stanhope kicking and Doug Stanhope lives in some podunk town in Arizona for no reason. And I think they can convince him to go live in Dripping Springs or, Fredericksburg or some weird town where he can go be weird and he can come back and do jokes and actually have a career again.
Well, I think a lot of comedians out there could get quote unquote second chances. Some of these comedians that may have done or said something really dumb, right, that effectively ended their careers or whatever, that could come down to Joe, where Joe Rogan's like, they call up Joe and say, hey, or Joe Rogan's people call up them and go, hey, you're funny as shit. You know what I mean? You need to come back to comedy, and I'm going to give you the stage to do it, right, down here in Austin, with none of the ties, like, okay, you were banned from here, you were banned from the basement up in New York, right? And give them a second opportunity, and it could be big.
There's a lot of comedians that who in the last 2 years got canceled, as the youths like to say. They got their management let cut them loose or whatever. And I think that Joe Rogan's the kind of guy who's like, you don't need a manager, you don't need, if you have an assistant, and if he said this before, if you have an assistant and you're a comedian, you're doing too much. Just do less.
Yeah, just do less and charge more. And look, that's great for entrepreneurship in general. Learning that rule in entrepreneurship, it's difficult. Believe me, it is difficult to hand off things. It's difficult to, do less sometimes. Again, because we're all taught that hustle mentality. But the fact is you can do and make a crap ton of money. And believe me, folks, it's worked for me, right? Because you can do more by working less if you do it more effectively. Okay, and that kind of stuff. And that's
if you build systems, right? That's the big thing. But nonetheless, what I'm driving at here, or why I found this story interesting when you sent it to me, again, another story that I allowed History's Big Man send was, it's a little inside baseball. It's a little local to Austin and what have you.
Well, and I want to bring this up before you wrap it up, because one of the things I found in this that I found interesting is even a person like Joe Rogan that is a comedian. Okay, he partnered with a stop it jerk. He partnered with a guy, Adam Egget, right? Which is actually, he was the manager of the store. He was a manager at another big improv comedy out in Tempe, Arizona. A big, you're right, comedy.
Yeah.
So he's ran 2 successful comedy clubs, and he's partnered with him because, look, Joe Rogan, great comedian, but that doesn't mean he knows anything about running a comedy store, right? So the fact is that he did. Again, that's a big entrepreneur thing. You've got to know sometimes that you got to take on a good partner that knows what they're doing about
business. I think he's well capitalized. Joe Rogan is well capitalized. He has a huge brand. And he's brought in Adam Egget, who's successful at running other comedy clubs. This is just one of those things I look at and go, this can't fail. It just won't.
I think the chances of it failing are slim to none.
So low.
I mean, it's
yeah.
Anyway, do your wrap up, you weirdo. Okay, I'm sorry I took you off your train to get a entrepreneur.
Well, listen,
right?
My name is Danny, and for Idiots versus Idiots and my co-host, the Big Man, I'm signing off, reminding you that some have said success is the best revenge, but I've personally found that actual revenge is more satisfying.
This show with you is your revenge on me for forever, okay?
All
I'm saying is it's painful. That's it.
Well, you signed up for it, and you deserve everything you get.
We'll see you next time, folks.